Good evening, everyone. We were just saying how nice it is having the table set up like this. I think it is creating even more chat than normally occurs at the Foundation for Science and Technology. So welcome, everyone, to this Foundation for Science and Technology event. Welcome to those in the room at the Royal Society, and also to those of you on Zoom. I feel like I want to know where the camera is. There. Welcome to everybody on Zoom as well. Thank you for joining us. The Foundation is really grateful to the Camino Foundation for their support of this evening, and also for the Royal Commission for the exhibition of 1851, also for their support for this evening, which wouldn't be able to happen without their support. So we should all be thanking them. I'm Hilary Leevers. I'm not David Willits. You might have worked that out. I'm Hilary Leevers, CEO of Engineering UK. And Engineering UK is an organisation dedicated to enabling more people from all backgrounds to progress into engineering and technology, inspiring them and informing them about careers in those areas. And we do this through research and analysis. We work with hundreds of organisations to support them in their engineering and tech outreach, trying to increase the collective impact of all of those activities. And then we also make our own contribution, working directly with young people through things like the Big Bang Fair, which some of you may know about. And we've just set our next 5-year strategy, and we've particularly pulled out the area of vocational training as one which we'll be attending to. We have concerns in this area with the decline of apprenticeships and with the rollout of T-levels, and with the need to fill the technical skills gap. So I felt very privileged, but also very, very pleased to be invited to chair this evening's conversation and learn more about the ideas and insights from our panelists, but also all the questions and comments that you all have. So the question for tonight is, how can schools and colleges prepare young people for a technological life and help tackle the technical skills gap? And we've invited panelists to look at a range of questions associated with this. It might include, how can we ensure that the right skills are taught at schools pre-16 that enable post-16 technical education to be successful? What should schools and FE colleges be contributing to post-16 technical education? And quite a fundamental question, maybe it should be first, is the role of FE fully understood in discussions about post-16 and post-18 technical education? And we have a brilliant panel tonight who will be bringing a wide range of perspectives to those questions. And we also encourage you all to get involved, think about the questions you would like to ask them, and we will take them all together at the end. And if you are on Zoom, then please log any questions that you have into the Q&A function, not the chat function. And if you do that, I'll know where to find them, but also you can upvote others' questions or make comments on them. So that's a really good way to do it. And if any of you want to tweet about tonight, then please do so and use the hashtag FSTskills. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Professor Bill Lucas. Bill is director of the Centre for Real World Learning at the University of Winchester. Bill's research focuses on understanding those, oh, no, that's not Bill. Have I pressed the button? No, okay. Rhymes with Bill, not Bill. Okay. So Bill is the co-founder of Rethinking. I'm gonna look away. These are all spoilers. Here we go. Excellent, we're back. So Bill is director of the Centre for Real World Learning at the University of Winchester. Bill's research focuses on understanding the dispositions for learning, which help people succeed and flourish in life. And Bill is co-founder of Rethinking Assessment. And with Janet Hansen, they have developed a way of thinking about engineering as a series of engineering habits of mind, something which he, along with the Royal Academy of Engineering and many others of us, I think, in the room, including myself, argue should be cultivated in all pupils. So over to you, Bill. How do you think schools and colleges can prepare young people for the technological skills they need?
Thanks so much, Hilary, and apologies, Ella. We seem to be merging into each other just for a second there. And apologies that you've had a quick peek at the slides that I'm going to use, but hopefully that won't put you off too much. So the question, how can schools and colleges prepare young people for a technological life and help tackle the technical skills gap? And my answer, by rethinking the relationship between knowledge, skills, both technical and social and others, and habits and dispositions for learning, and starting really early at the very beginning of primary school. That's a rather simple answer, and there are some more clues here. Something about exploring the value and power of practical learning, something about using head, heart, and hands. Any good learning is a combination of those three elements. Learning at its best, whether you're exercising and thinking as a musician, or as a scientist, or as an environmentalist, or as a poet, or as an engineer, they're going to have these elements together. But in school, we've become slightly over-fixated, I would argue, on the head when we come to look at those trio. More of that in a second. With the Royal Academy of Engineering, just down the terrace, we've been working for more than a decade to try and understand a little more about how engineers think and act, and to move away from thinking about engineers as a series of subject experts, often mathematics and physics and others, many other disciplines, but to think about the way they see the world. And the result of that research, which I'm thrilled to say was identified by the Institute of Mechanical Engineers as one of the big ideas in engineering education of the last decade, is to focus on a series of 6 habits of mind, engineering habits of mind. And they're the ones that you can see in the middle of that bullseye: systems thinking, adapting, problem finding, as well as creative problem solving, visualizing, and all the while improving. Round the edge of that, some wider, more generic learning habits of mind of the kind that I think make us human. So our curiosity, our creativity, our reflection, our resilience and persistence, and so forth. We've also been looking closely at what's going on in practical learning in schools, and especially in secondary schools. It's interesting, we've been collaborating with the Royal Society and looking at the somewhat demise of the practical in science. Well, there's a somewhat demise of practical right across the educational experience of young people. And we've mapped a series of beacon schools doing extraordinary work, quite often despite rather than because of the current system. Many of those schools are working closely with colleges, and I'm really delighted to be sharing a stage with 2 FE colleagues who I think are far too often underrated. When it comes to the school landscape, we've gone further and tried to identify schools that are really consistently, intentionally, and systematically embedding these kind of experiences right across the curriculum. Here's just one, the Derby High School in Bury. If you search for this school and practical learning, you'll get to the website that the Royal Academy of Engineering runs. So we're undoubtedly in a technological age where we don't allegedly have to know things. We can just Google it. We can't be bothered to use our fingers. We can talk it out loud. We're all carrying this extraordinary technological feat of engineering in our hands. If we go running, we can compare ourselves with others. We can think about where we're going and why we're going and how high we're going. And we can get stuck on our walks and take the flipping phone out and have a look. And rather than remembering what that plant is, we can have a look at it on our phone with a smart app. We don't have to use maps anymore. We just have a sat nav. We can even have a camera in the middle of our fridge to tell us what we don't have in the fridge and to start ordering from our favorite grocer, whatever it is we don't have. And we're linked in a glorious, is it glorious, technological world. We can even ask these questions of ChatGPT. How many of you use ChatGPT? I asked ChatGPT what the answer to tonight's question was. Here's what it said. There are several ways schools and colleges can prepare young people for a technological life and help tackle the technical skills gap. It's been taught to repeat the question, hasn't it? You can see that. And then 6 relatively straightforward: incorporate technology in the curriculum, provide access to technology, encourage project-based learning, tick, partner with industry leaders, tick, emphasize soft skills. Don't like that word, but I know that they're really important. Well, Ella and I will have a conversation about that. And provide career counselling, a halfway decent answer, and impressively halfway decent. But what it doesn't have, of course, is the unique capability of the human mind to think things which have not been thought. It can't scrape those thoughts up, and it takes a novelist perhaps to remind us of that. And herein, I think, lies a difficulty that we've got obsessed by knowledge in the current educational world. I love knowledge. I'm deeply passionate about knowledge. But it's not the only thing we want our young people to acquire whilst they're in formal education. We want skills, we want capabilities and competencies, and I'm arguing want habits and dispositions. And the connection between these is what really interests me. We learn something, we know something, the know what. Those of you interested in educational philosophy will recognize Gilbert Ryle's work here. We then work out how to do something. Sometimes that means applying the knowledge in a context. We then not only know what and how, but we regularly do it. It becomes a competence that we can call upon. And then I think this is the gold standard. We routinely do it. We practice it. So we start to do it without even knowing. It becomes our default setting. If you like, our habits, or one stage further, our disposition. The clue is in the word. We are disposed to do it. And that's really important, I think. And that's the area I think we want to inject more thinking into schools right from primary. My colleague and friend Guy Claxon has written very elegantly about this, if you're interested. It's a kind of expanded essay on Descartes' error, the false dichotomy between head and heart, or mind and body. I won't read out what's there because you can see that. But I think it's really important that we start to hear it again with more subtlety for the way that the body speaks to us and for us and about us, and the role of our hands in all of these. You see it at first hand, do you not? There's that clue, at first hand. I wonder where that comes from. You see it in engineers, you see it in medics, and interestingly, of course, in higher education, the way that doctors and engineers are often trained is through problem-based learning. We don't start from the curriculum, we start from the challenge, the real-world problem. Those of you who were just listening earlier on to Hilary will have known that I run a research group called the Centre for Real World Learning. That's my interest. So, cutting to the chase in my remaining 4 minutes, what do we need to do? I would suggest that we need consciously to rebalance head, heart, and hands. Some of you may know David Goodhart's writing on this. Some of you may know schools that are doing this very effectively. In the East End of London, School 21 and Big Education is a really powerful exponent of this. There's a very well-known independent school, Bedales, that has long since done this and has seen this as at the essence of what it is to be an educated human being. Secondly, I believe we need to embed, as Hilary was kindly mentioning earlier on, these kind of habits from the off. So we need to be thinking about, how do you learn to be resourceful when you're writing a poem? How do you learn resilience when you're dealing with a tricky scientific experiment? How do you consider the ethics of anything when you're doing anything? How do you actively fund and fuel the curiosity of all young people when the examination system will often reward one right answer? In fact, those of us in the business start to refer to them as 2 markers or 4 markers or 6 markers in a very reductionist way. And around these engineering habits of mine, developed in conversations with engineers, mainly fellows of the Royal Academy of Engineering, but not exclusively, those are the kind of habits that make the centre of what we believe make fantastic engineers. Hilary also mentioned rethinking assessment. Thank you. In fact, with the founder of School 21, Peter Hyman, it's been my privilege to create a new movement with others, and using digital here as part of the answer and the question, we're arguing that all school leavers might leave their formal education with a digital learner profile. That profile would, of course, mark the building blocks, if you like, the more formal literacies that you can see in the middle on the left. It'll allow us to note some of the other courses, especially those which are interdisciplinary that they've done, and perhaps those that have taken place in the community or as part of their work experience. It'll focus top left on what we're calling the 3 Cs, really important dispositions around creative thinking, collaboration, and communication. In the top right, it'll be doing what all learners throughout their lifetime have to reflect on, and that is, how did they do? How am I doing? How am I doing as a learner? And then in the bottom part of it, an opportunity to have testimonials, photographs, and other evidence of your beautiful work, and so forth and so forth. We were thrilled. We submitted evidence to the recent Times Commission. We were thrilled that Rachel Sylvester and the commissioners recommended this as part of their final report. The qualification they're talking about there is a baccalaureate. Not sure the word is right, but it's a broad, balanced, both practical, applied, and academic curriculum that we'd like to see all young people continuing right through their school life. To sum up for us, practical learning, that is to say, good learning, is whole, involving head, heart, and hands working in harmony. When teachers use carefully chosen strategies that encourage learners to experience and navigate real-world challenges, acquire and apply their knowledge in a range of settings, explicitly develop skills and dispositions for lifelong learning. Forgive the rapid delivery, but that was 10 minutes, and that was what I was asked to do. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Phil. That was perfectly timed. And I particularly noted your 4 minutes to the end check-in. It was very reassuring. So next we have two speakers that you have trailed from the Activate Learning Limited group. Nancy Buckley is Group Director of Business Development, and it was during a visit to Banbury and Bicester College that she realised how much impact a college could make on raising young people's life prospects, and that's what motivated you to join the company. Banbury is one of 7 colleges that Activate run in the Oxfordshire and Berkshire region. And also Sharmen Ibrahim will be joining us. She's Group Director of Digital Education across the group and has been leading the digital education provision since 2017, working closely with curriculum colleagues to ensure the implementation of a 5-year digital strategy across the group, which means that it must have just finished, so we'll be able to hear how well it all went. And that includes the contextualization of digital competencies across the curriculum area. So we'll be hearing some real world views now. So come on up. Thank you.
There you go, that question again. Sharmen's going to follow me in a moment or two and come up on stage once I've had my 10 minutes. So thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting us both here. I feel very honoured to be speaking at such a venue. I did visit here. I used to work in publishing. I was a library sales rep, and I visited the library here to sell the first online books and journals as they came out for Blackwell Publishing. So it's lovely to be back, but in a different guise. And I'm not a teacher. I don't come from a teaching background, but I entered the college world and the FE college world to bring employability skills and that business profile into the college so that our students got that work ready experience and motivation. And I still do that job today, bringing employers into the college to meet with our students and talk to them about all the different careers that are available to them. I'm going to give an FE college perspective, and as Hilary said, we are 7 colleges, but we're also a schools group as well. We have the Activate Learning Trust, and I noticed that UTC, I think it was Oxfordshire, was on Bill's slide there as one of the schools he's working with. We're an apprenticeship training provider as well. And we have our own Activate Learning online platform that Sharmen will talk about soon, as well as some international operation where we assess and deliver overseas as well. So it's quite a big group. We travel around all of our different college campuses working with all of our different students. So hopefully I can give an accurate overview of all of that. And just November, a couple of months ago, we got rated as Ofsted Good. We went through the Ofsted experience under the new skills inspection framework, which was quite an experience for me because I've never done Ofsted before, but it was great to achieve that good rating there. So As you've indicated, following primary and secondary school, it becomes the FE world's job to look after those 16-year-old plus learners. And we usually only have them with us for 2 or 3 years. So we've got these students in our hands from the tender age of 16 up to 18 or 19 if they stay with us that long. And it's at that point really when they come to college, and if you ever visit one of your local FE colleges, and I'd encourage you to do so, you'll see the fantastic workshops and facilities that we have. And it's sometimes only then at the age of 16 that the students get to practice and hone those habits and skills that we're talking about this evening. And some might say that it might be a little bit too late, but we do our very best to get them motivated and get them working on that vocation that they've chosen to study with us. There are essentially 3 pathways now for a student that goes on into post-16 in education. They can still continue with their A-levels, and usually that's at a 6th form or a college. They can study a various number of vocational programs, or they can now do the T-level. And I was asked today to talk a little bit about what the T-level qualification is. It's a technical level qualification set to be equivalent to the 3 A-levels, but it's in a particular vocational subject area that the student's chosen. So it could be in engineering or digital technologies and so on. There are, of course, also apprenticeships that underpin all of that, and you can start your apprenticeship from 16 years upwards, right the way through into adult life and into any age group now. So you're never too old to be an apprentice, since levelling up and lifelong learning is now a trend and a great opportunity for all of us in work too. So this is the T-level programme. Please forgive the very complex slide here, but basically it encompasses a core qualification of technical qualification time at college, which can be anything from 20 to 50%. The other part of the programme is developing an occupational specialism. So, for example, if you're studying a hospitality T-level, you'll have a generic cookery skills in year 1, but then you might specialise in baking or butchery or a particular specialism in year 2. So there's all of that classroom learning and practice that goes on, but the real differentiator in this 2-year programme is the industry placement, which can be anything between 315 to 420 hours over the length of that programme. That's about 45 days of on-the-job, sort of long, thin placement with an employer. So T-levels have been developed by employers and universities and colleges in partnership with the government too, to provide the skills that employers need. The first T-levels have been developed in digital and in construction, health and education and childcare. At Activate Learning, we have around 300 students now studying T-levels. The majority of those are in the health sector, so they're studying health, and we've found them lots of placements with our local NHS hospitals and services too. The course also includes additional elements for the students, which includes maths and English. So students at college, if they haven't achieved a level 4, continue to do maths and English throughout their education with us. But even if they have achieved level 4 and above, we keep practicing and we keep giving them maths and English challenges because that's still so important for them. We hope that the T-levels are an exciting new qualification. They certainly seem to be gaining popularity and people seem to have heard of them now, and that's through parents as well as employers alike. And it's certainly gaining interest and momentum. One of my jobs with my team at Activate Learning is to go out and contact employers and ask them to give our students that T-level placement. And when we do so, what's really important, this struck me that this circle here was quite similar to Bill's circle and the learning habits of mind that he spoke about. We have a learning philosophy at Activate Learning, which tries to bring together the brain, the emotions and the motivation. You could say that's the head, heart and hands within our college. So we encourage our students to practice, to read and research and develop their knowledge through the brain. But also we work with them on the motivational aspects and on their whole emotional psyche, if you like, to give them the confidence to go out. So underpinning everything we learn is a personal curriculum that includes attributes that are key to developing the whole person. And most commonly, when I visit employers and talk to them about young students coming out on placements, employers can teach the skills actually, and they're not so interested in the qualification that a student might come out of college with. However, what they are really interested in is a student that's got some resilience, or somebody that's professional, turns up on time, is dressed appropriately, can get themselves to work and back, and shows up, more importantly, the next day as well, and the next day and the next day, and keeps returning. And it's those important skills that not all 16-year-olds have. And you know, we've all been 16 before, everybody's very different. So we do need to bring those skills on in our students as well. So let me say a little bit more about those industry placements, because this is the key to the T level, and it's also the key challenge as well. Maybe the industry placement could be what we're calling the Centre for Real World Learning that Bill referred to, in that this is where students do get a taste of that real world. And if you think about what the 16-year-olds that are with us now have been through, they've probably had 2 years at home where they didn't even get to go to school to socialise and meet with people. So for some of them, walking into an office space or an engineering workshop or somewhere very different would be the first time they've been to a professional space like that before. As I say, we've got 300 students with us studying T levels in health and engineering and digital sciences and business. And we've been well supported by some large businesses. We have a whole class of students going to John Lewis Waitrose in Bracknell. We have 40 students at the Oxford University Hospitals Trust and 6 out at BMW at the moment. So those, one of the key things we have to do is ensure that the placements are of high quality and that they're of benefit both to the students and the employers. It's quite a job though, looking for those employers that will take on a student. It's no small feat for an employer, and we understand how busy everyone is, to have a 16-year-old there every week, week in, week out, and finding tasks, meaningful tasks for them to do. We also have to ask the employer to assess what they're up to, so that they're doing the right thing in the workplace, and it's all contributing to their curriculum as well. So ensuring the consistency of industry placements is really important. And then we have to make sure that the industry placements that are so that we're not too regional, and that there's not sector specific variations that might be different for one student to another. Other additional challenges are, of course, many of us still work from home. There's hybrid working now. And also that students might have some confidence and anxiety issues for us to deal with that prevent them even wanting to walk through the door of a workplace. Also, in addition to that, I've realised I'm reeling off some of the problems here, but it feels quite cathartic. So we have to check that the students are arriving on time. So all those attendance issues that are quite easy when you're expecting a student to come into college, we've now got to track down whether they've arrived at 30 or 40 different placements. And if they haven't, the employer needs to know who they ring up to report them absent, and so on. And then we have to manage behaviour issues outside of the classroom too, if there are any, and help educate our employers too about looking after younger people than they might ordinarily have had within their workplace. So therefore, teachers need to help educate both the students and the employers. And I think also that colleges now, because we are sometimes short on teachers ourselves that have the relevant skills and the work-ready skills, we've got to make sure we're being very innovative in using alternative delivery methods to get across our teaching as well. Once you've finished your T level, just like A levels, you can then fit to go on to university if you want to. You can go into further study and undertake other further technical training qualifications, such as a higher level apprenticeship, or after your T-level qualification, you can of course go into employment as well. And now we're entering the second year of our T-levels, and those students that have been out on placement are getting interviews now and having those discussions with the employers that they're with about taking on a full-time role with them once they've finished their education, which is fantastic to see, and we're getting great feedback there. So for us, we see the T-level as a real strength. We think there's still challenges there, but we are working very closely with working parties at the Department of Education and so on to make sure we're feeding back our experiences, and they are indeed adapting. So I shall hand over at this point to Sharmen, who's going to take you through some of those digital innovations that we're making within our colleges as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Oh, okay, I didn't look back actually. I sat there and my back was to the audience, but nice to see everybody here. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak at this event. So when I first heard of the event itself, I had no idea what this is about, and we had a bit of an introduction call and I did a bit of research, as you always do. And I thought, oh, okay, wow, lots of people with titles and knowledge. And as Bill said, there's always room for knowledge. But it's a nice segue from what Nancy described. So in Activate Learning, I've been working there since 2016. Excuse me. My background is HE. I moved to the UK in 2015. I didn't know what further education is, I'll be honest. I had no idea there's something called vocational training, because where I come from was schools and you go to university or you go to find a job in your local place. And I decided to do engineering, and lots of pushback, female engineering, electrical, you know, we can't call you at night because you can't be doing this. So all these challenges were in place. But one thing really struck me is when I left university, I left with a huge amount of knowledge and very little amount of other skills. And when I say other skills, that's a big, massive bag of soft, hard, middle, whatever you want to call it. I sat in meetings and I have all the knowledge, but I didn't know how to put a set of slides together to the audience that I had in front of me. And throughout being in vocational learning and having direct contact with our students and the Ofsted multiple iterations that we went through in 2017 and then in 2022, there is obviously a need to equip these learners with more than just a qualification, more than just the knowledge they need to go to the market. The employer is interested in more than that. Not just the technical knowledge. The technical knowledge will get you to the end of that, how to fix a laptop or get something, you know, sorted for that specific area. But it's the resilience, it's everything else. So in Activate Learning, we have a digital strategy which is coming to an end now, and we are launching our new. I would like to call it a 3 years. Our executive team wants to go to a 5, so we're debating. We might go for a 4-year strategy. I believe the technological rhythm is very fast, so I think we need to go with a 3 years and then come up with something rapid after that. But I just wanted to highlight our strategic drivers, and the reason being is I just wanted to show that in here there is 2 areas, which is, well, majority of them linked to digital directly or indirectly. So technology being obviously the dominant one, but as part of our learning philosophy, the neuroscience element, well-being, we use a lot of our digital apps and everything for well-being, and we take well-being really seriously with our learners. But also there's globalization. They become global citizens. They need to learn digital communication, digital collaboration across the world with other people as well as sustainability, of course. So we believe that to strengthen our students with these digital competencies, which is now maths, English, and digital literacies, we need to equip our staff at the same time, because to teach that element, to learn, to be able to deliver, you need to know that from the start. So this is a very short journey of our digital competencies framework, but this work really started in 2017. We have gone through multiple iterations. We try to deliver it as a standalone subject called digital skills. We try to deliver it as part of the enrichment. And now we're trying to deliver it with the main aim curriculum or through their main subject. And this is our best trial and our best iteration so far. So in March 2022, we launched our framework. I'm really pleased that 3 of the 6 C's that we've identified as digital competencies were in Bill's presentation. So just in case, excuse me, that's just forces the same thing. So we came up with this framework. Excuse me. We introduced it to staff in April. We had everybody trained on an introduction and around the 6 C's, as we call them: creation, collaboration, connection, curation, communication, and critical thinking. Got them. So what we did afterwards is we wanted to establish a baseline for all our staff and students to know where they are and how they can improve those digital competencies. So we created a diagnostic assessment within our colleges. What's really beautiful about this diagnostic is it sends the students into different pathways depending on their level. So it's not a one size fits all. We know that doesn't work for everybody. It creates a spiky profile for every student and staff. We created a staff toolkit. We then we had an event called Connect to College Week, which is really important for us at the beginning of the year. So in week 0, as we call it, there is no teaching that takes place in our colleges. That week 0 is we just teach the students or introduce the students to different elements of what they will do. There's a little bit around activities for their vocational areas, but we also introduce the 6 competencies. We introduce the learning philosophy, things about online safety, safeguarding, which is really, really important when you are 16. We then went into the exciting element, which is contextualizing digital competencies. And I always remember this example. I went into a construction classroom and the student was there. And I said, what do you want to learn? Oh, I would just want to learn how to lay bricks. I said, then what you want to do when you finish? I'll have my own business. How are you going to set up your business? I don't know. You need a digital skill to set up your business. You need the digital skills to contact your customers. You need a digital skill to do this and this and this. Ah, okay. And the penny dropped. They realize they need it. But sometimes when you are 16, it's really hard to see that. So we need to equip our staff to make it clear to these students, why do they need the digital competencies? As Nancy mentioned, we had the great Ofsted visiting us in November 2022. I'll be honest, if anybody here is from FE, if you go through Ofsted and you come out the other side, okay, you are resilient. That framework is tough. That framework is really tough. It's a lot of work, lots of data, lots of, I could talk about it till tomorrow. It was really hard. And there's an element of focus on digital as well. I had one of the inspectors really interested in this and they wanted to see how this is embedded. Where is the students sort of measured around this? Where's the impact? And from an Ofsted view, this is a new thing. We haven't been asked about that before. So just reiterates the emphasis of digital. And we continue to promote digital within our different areas. So without going into too much details, I use the construction example because it's classic to how can we embed digital into our curriculum. A lot of the time, what we teach in vocational is the qualification, and actually we need to broaden that. So they need to be able to use 2D, 3D. We've got 3D printing facilities in our campuses. How a construction learner will be able to design something and come up and actually print it and see their work in real life. So the product we've created, and we're really proud of this, is it gives them a diagnostic. It sends the students into personalized pathways for students. And then there's another set of pathways for staff with a pedagogical approach behind it. There's a matrix with the 6 competencies at 4 different levels. Each one will get a different level. There is a subject-specific activity card, as I showed here. We have this for all our subjects. It's a huge amount of work that we've gone through. I think we've got probably around 500 activity cards for the levels and the subject areas. We've got our spaces of technology-enhanced learning where we practice these digital competencies. We put bespoke support plans for our staff. We do digital clubs. And we do differentiated approaches for our high-need learners. And recently we introduced Lego sets. If you've ever seen those Lego Prime or Spike sets, they are fantastic. It's not just a Lego like you put it together, you can actually program it. And our high-need learners who've got very complex learning needs are really, really enjoying that. Lego, I'll take 10% of that share. I just made a massive
advertising for you. So yeah, so this is what just briefly what we have. It's, as I said, each teacher gets a toolkit. They can use the contextualized digital in their subject area. Students like it because it makes sense. We are not asking a student who's studying access to nursing to create a Canva infographic. We're saying, how can you manage patient records securely? That's meaningful for them. That makes sense. When you go to an engineering student, how can you use AutoCAD to create panel drawing, blah, blah, blah. It makes sense to the subject area. These are just some of our students in action. So that's a sports teacher teaching anatomy and physiology using VR. The photo is not great, but I couldn't get people's faces on because I need consent of every single learner in that photo. And the other learners using Oculus Quest for a drone simulator that we created in-house. I could go on about digital for the next 24 hours. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you so much for that pair of talks. Really amazing food for thought. And I have loads of questions I want to ask, which I will try not to ask because I'll wait to see if somebody else asks them. But thank you so much. And it does sound like you are doing incredible things there. So now to our fourth speaker, Ella Podmore. Ella is a senior materials engineer working for McLaren Automotive. She is responsible for material-related investigations across all projects of the business, specializing in surface treatments and microscopic metallic analysis. She's been in the company for 4 years and has been very busy because in that time, she has won the Institution for Engineering and Technology's Young Woman Engineer of the Year in 2020, been named Surrey's Top 40 Under 40 in 2022. And it says here, more recently received an MBE for contributions to engineering, innovation and diversity. But I think you're actually leaving early because you're getting it tomorrow. So I don't know technically at what point you receive it, but we're very happy that you are still able to join us here today, Ella. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I feel very honoured and inspired to be here today, guys. It's not often that I get to sit this side of the fence. Normally, all of you are probably about 16 years old, or you're a room filled with engineers, and I'm trying to convince them to make it 2 kilos lighter or something like that. So honestly, thank you so much for considering me to be here. I think rather than echo some of the endless amounts of skills and policies that we've been going on about, the important policies we've been going on about today, I kind of wanted to reflect on my journey that I've had and the relevant skills that have got me through that process of what I have learned from going through the pathway that I have been, and the fortunate things I've been able to do and win, what has got me there, because I do think there is a gap. I do think that what we're missing in terms of job applications, what we're putting on our job specs and what we can translate through to teachers is definitely something we can talk about tonight. And I'm excited to get into it. So my journey did start back at university. I did a degree, 4 years masters of material science in engineering. And I studied that at Manchester. And it was during that university degree that I had an industrial placement. And I think that was the pivotal part of my education. And I'm so glad we've touched upon that already. Nancy's touched upon industrial placements. Now, during that placement, it gave me a purpose. I picked up so many things in terms of professional interaction, but also what made a company tick. And it was that experience that led me on to get a job offer from McLaren. It gave me a topic that I could focus my thesis on, which was later published and allowed me to get the job offer and role going at McLaren as well. And understanding what issue is going on in the business is only really possible by placing yourself and immersing yourself in that particular type of experience. And that's why I'm such an advocate for it. And I'd love to get into a discussion on what more we can do in terms of industrial placements and that work experience ethic as well. So off the back of taking away that topic, researching it as part of my master's, McLaren offered me a position of materials engineer. And prior to that, they didn't have a materials division. It was mainly mechanical, automotive engineering based. And this is something that I'd like to get into a little bit when we talk about diversifying that talent pool, why we need to look further than just the traditional routes and talent pools going into particular industries, why branching out to the likes of material scientists or coders and software programmers is going to be ever so essential when we look towards the future of UK manufacturing, but then also to keep up with the likes of the tech giants and startups that we're competing with as well. I've been at McLaren for about 5 years now, 6 years, including that internship. And since then, I've been incredibly fortunate to have won the IET Young Women Engineer of the Year in 2020. And then, of course, getting awarded the MBE, which I'm picking up tomorrow. But it wasn't the degree, it wasn't the modules, it wasn't the exam results that I would say have been most impactful on my journey. It would be these skills. And I'm going to upset Bill when I say soft skills. So maybe we should call them life skills, whatever we can discuss in a little bit. But these life skills are the things that I consider to be the most impactful on my journey and the things that I will carry with me throughout my course and what I go on to do next. And as a STEM ambassador, I get to frequently visit schools, colleges, and talk to students and interact with them and hopefully influence them on why getting into science, technology, engineering and maths, or changing their mind about science, technology, engineering and maths to consider it as an option. And these life skills often come into that play as well. And from going to these schools, we talked about the behaviors and the attributes, the creative thinking, the resilience, all part of this. But what I took away from going to these schools and colleges is two main factors, which I think also incorporate the skills that I have learned along my journey in order to share this knowledge, but then also the skills that we need to essentially teach these students as well. The first one being visualization. This I found to be such a huge, important factor of where I've gotten today, but then also understanding that this is so important for students to pick up on. And yes, I admit it's a lot easier for students to visualize when you're traveling with a £500,000 supercar and they can say, yep, seen that before, seen that on Top Gear. But that social media presence, that interaction, how is that relatable to their everyday life? How can they picture themselves getting into this particular type of industry? We need to shed the stereotype that it's just top set of maths that are able to go on to be engineers. This is so much more than that. And I hope visualization, I see visualization being a key point to see that they can place themselves in that company, and that could be them doing this particular role. The second factor I'd like to discuss, of course, is educating parents as well. So I do a lot of work with students directly, a lot of work with teachers, professors. I see how influential they are and how influential they have been to my particular career pathway. But changing the norm in which parents think how their child can go into education, changing the norm that it's only university degrees that can facilitate supplying engineering companies or scientific companies, or having to achieve straight A's in order to do this. We need to broadcast and diversify our workforce if we're ever going to move the UK manufacturing, the UK automotive industry forward. And we need to diversify that workforce in order to get that diversification of product as well. So as we look forward to what the UK manufacturing scene is, and I obviously talk on behalf of the automotive industry, I am excited for that talent pool to expand when we talk about apprenticeships, diversification of workforce, sponsored PhD subjects, anything that's going to give them that sense of purpose, resilience, creative thinking outside of the classroom, those skills that I've talked about being so influential to my particular career. And although McLaren, what we're doing, working with councils, working with local enterprises, addressing what kind of skills we're looking to see, software in particular, coding is going to be a big one for the automotive industry as well. There is still so much more that we can be doing. And I think if we look towards the future in terms of what challenges we're facing, I've talked about competing with tech giants, being close to London, tech startups, and these companies are often considering the skill set and the life skills in their application. Whereas necessarily the automotive industry, we're still focusing on that education or that degree and those particular grades that we're achieving. And yet, funnily enough, in my interview, although my application was asking for all sorts of educational background, my interview was about what would you do in conflict? How would you settle teamwork? How would you, if someone, I was managing netball at university, and if someone went off sick, how would you settle team morale? And these are the kind of things that McLaren are picking up on. And yet when you read that application, that is not necessarily what was reflected in what you thought you could apply to the job with. So as we're competing with tech industries who are picking up on these personality traits, these characteristics, these life skills, we should hopefully reflect our job applications to match. So in order for us to compete with the tech giants as such, but also transitioning to net zero, we're going to need a huge diversification of workforce as we overcome electrification, as we go through autonomous technology. No longer can we just simply assume that mechanical engineers can be supplying our talent pool, and we need to think about how our products and technologies are going to be changing. And this is done by targeting skill set rather than educational grades. So to finish with, I would just like to say that the technical skills gap we can address, particularly in conversations tonight. I would like everyone to go away with changing the narrative, how we can go home, we can address our students, address our children, aspiring scientists and technologists about what the narrative actually is. You don't have to be the most talented person in your math set in order to get into this particular type of industry. Also, to end with opening opportunities. Every single one of us has the opportunity to make an impact, whether it be signing up our employees to become STEM ambassadors if you're working for a technology firm, or if you're part of the educational system, reaching out to local STEM ambassadors, because I feel like we're making such an impact with the kind of communication that we're doing with those programs as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ella. And now to our final speaker, Phil Smith. Phil is currently chairman of IQE PLC, Striva and Appiway, and he is former chief executive and chairman of Cisco UK and Ireland, and former chairman of Innovate UK and Tech Skills. He is co-chair of the Digital Skills Council and a member of the Digital Economy Council, and was awarded a CBE in 2019 for services to technology, business and skills. And in 2019, also a good year, made a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Over to you, Phil.
Well, good evening all. I think I'd like to, not touch that. I would like for what I'd like to do now, I'd actually like to bottle Ella and what Sharmen and Nancy are doing and do it much more everywhere, because actually what they're doing is amazing. And I think the structures that Bill talked about as well are very much, I think, where we need to be going overall with this. So, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about, with the background, as Hilary said, I chair the Digital Skills Council, which is a relatively new council, been set up to try and address some of the gaps in the digital skills portfolio that's out there, because there's a lot of stuff available. And I also happen to chair the Education and Skills Committee for the Royal Academy of Engineering next door as well. But I thought what might be worth, and just to expand on what Bill said slightly, is just to expand on the fact that, you know, we are living, if we're talking about schools and colleges preparing young people for a technological life to help tackle the technical skills gap, the question really is, you know, what is that technological life? Because as Bill identified in his various icons and pictures, you know, we're in a very different world now where technology pervades everywhere. It's pervading not only the things we've seen for years of shopping and travel and so on, but of course now dominating things like health, and of course the challenge of net zero and climate change, where it will become much more pervasive. And then as we start to see the impact of some of the more advanced digital technologies like AI and quantum and so on, we're going to see a much greater impact. So we have to recognize that we're living in a world where we're bringing people up into roles and environments that are very different than maybe some of the systems that we've used up to this point have been designed for. And it seems that people will be exposed to technology. Ella just talked about it, but we've seen National Grid talking about the need to recruit, 400,000 people up to 2050, many in very technical roles like smart grid, IoT, and so on. And then despite some of the challenges around battery manufacture, which there are clearly some at the moment, Faraday Institute, which is the Battery Institute, talking about, 182,000 existing vehicle technicians with only 20,000 or so who have got EV type capability. So no matter what job you're moving into, what environment you're coming into, you're going to be exposed to technology and to digital in particular in the case I've been talking about. The reality, of course, is the good news is that many of these jobs are higher value and higher skilled jobs. So in this drive, if you will, as an economy that needs to pervade in this complex world where we need higher value jobs, it's good news that we're getting people towards this direction. But there are some very significant challenges. We have a long way to go. There's no doubt about it. There are hundreds of thousands of job vacancies, many who are quoting that technology and digital skills in particular are a big shortcoming. So we need to find a way of getting, as an employer and as someone from business, these skills into the system that allow us to be able to fulfill the kind of roles that are actually sitting out there at the moment, and actually the roles that we need to create for the next generation. But there's also a fundamental challenge about the digital confidence, particularly of the nation. You may be aware of the Essential Digital Skills Framework, which is a framework that's been measured by Lloyds Bank in particular over the last 5 or 6 years, where we've actually still got over 8 million people who don't have the essential digital skills for work. That's pretty shocking, really, as a nation, that we're in that kind of position. And particularly if we're talking about some of the things we want to do in the advanced industries or in the future, we need to be building the pipeline of people as well as just the experts that we have at the top of that particular stack. And some of the things we're looking at in the council is to actually say, how can we build the bottom of the triangle as well as the top of it and the middle? So important. But it's important that the two of the key areas, in fact, that were identified in that essential digital skills gap were actually around productivity type applications, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second, and safety applications. So are people safe? They're starting to go into this environment. Do they have the confidence to go online? Do they have the confidence to take digital technology for seriously? And as Sharmen pointed in, that is something we have to help people get into that place, because it's very difficult for many people who are engaged in that kind of environment. But, there are some encouraging statistics as well. In 2020, only 37% of people in the 18 to 24 range had the essential digital skills for life, which is quite surprising, isn't it? Given we expect young people to be generally very digitally competent. But by 2021, that number is now 70%. Now, clearly, that's probably been precipitated by the necessity to use digital technology during COVID, but it's a very encouraging trend. And additionally, as a business person, again, we need to look at our competitiveness, and productivity of the UK still lags significantly behind our competitive nations. We are some 17% behind the G7 in our productivity. And the two big needle movers in that area tend to be leadership and management and technology adoption. And underpinning technology, if you unpick it somewhat, you'll find that actually skills is really at the root of that again. So many people don't have the confidence to adopt the technological capability, particularly in small businesses, because they don't have the skills to underpin it. And way behind many of our European counterparts in that area. It's also partly that the technical learning environment is moving extremely quickly. And, it's not really properly representing what we need from the next generation. In fact, interestingly enough, if you look at the imbalance of technical jobs which are defined as technical job today, only 19% of those are populated by women. So something about the system that we have today is not correctly addressing it. So we have to do something pretty fundamental to get us to the next stage. So what do we do? Well, this discussion about next steps is clearly often bogged down by the issues of, you know, we have to have everybody doing physics, or we have to have everybody doing maths, or we have to have everybody doing STEM subjects. And I'm not saying that isn't important, because it is incredibly important. And there's no doubt about it, if we champion STEM or physics or maths, we will make big progress. But it's all important that actually those particular aspects of and those particular subjects, although they've been important, they're not the whole story. And in fact, in many cases, they're switching people off from engaging. You know, when you look at, for example, computing, which has gone through a big change over recent times, we know that the curriculum was revised in 2014, removed ICT from the curriculum, and we had a computing science GCSE put in place. Unfortunately, of course, you know, we're still seeing then large numbers of people bouncing off that and not continuing with computing science, some going back to it at university, but actually it's a real challenge around the way it's perceived. And I think the over focus sometimes on areas like physics and maths and so on, sometimes are changing the dynamics that we'd expect to see in the population. So, but, you know, there is scope somewhat to counter that potentially. I mean, some of the things, again, that Sharmen and the colleges were actually doing was really impressive, which is trying to give people this kind of base level of capability. Bill talked about it as well, about having some kind of baseline capability that everybody should have access to. I think clearly is something that would be attractive to people within a business environment. You know, and the issues are obviously also oversimplified something often to, well, what skills do business need? Can you tell us today? We'd like to know, and we'll start teaching somebody that. Well, I've got to say that I, as a business person, I'm not sure I could tell you exactly what roles are needed now. And if I did, I'm not even sure they'd be the roles for the future. If you look, for example, at some of the roles which are being articulated inside apprenticeships, for example, things like, you know, a cyber intrusion analyst. Well, you know, in cyber intrusion analyst, I definitely need some of those today, but am I going to need those in 20 years' time? Am I going to need those in 30 years' time? Am I going to need coders in 20 years' time? I'm not really sure. I mean, we all saw the great example with Bill from ChatGPT, but much of that stuff is going to be supplanted by AI and other capabilities. But we do want the fundamental characteristics of those particular courses and dynamics to be in place. So we know we're not going to change the curriculum overnight, but we do want potentially to have the people who are thinking about the characteristics of being a cyber threat analyst or a coder in our businesses. And as Bill, I think, said, and I think Nancy reiterated, you know, we will actually in business teach people the skills ourselves, but we need to have some of the core capabilities. I talk about the 4 C's. We've already had the 3 C's and the 6 C's today. So actually we're all on C's, which is pretty good. And they're all kind of the same ones. But I would like to see certainly almost all education framed with those 3, 6 or 4 C's, which basically are around collaboration, communication, creative thinking, and, you know, creativity, or critical thinking and creativity. I think if we can be looking at those fundamentals, we're going to be in a much better position. So, you know, one of the areas, particularly in the digital area, we've been focusing on is how we help people to understand whether digital skills and a digital career is something they would want. And we are definitely seeing, particularly people going into apprenticeships and then taking up digital careers, particularly in SMEs, as being a real challenge. And there is, in fact, an interesting OECD definition of digital skills, which is problem solving in a technology-rich environment. And I think that's a useful way of looking at it, which again reinforces some of the things that the other speakers said, which is that if you're a plumber, your problems are sending invoices, communicating with your customers, ordering supplies and so on. If you're a nurse, you've got a set of skills you need because you want to spend more time in front of your patients than you do filling in forms. So digital skills is something which has to be much more contextually relevant. And I think we would hope to see much more of that kind of thinking as we develop both the engagement of apprenticeships into business and as well as the qualifications that otherwise would be go into a business environment. So, I think ultimately we need to focus more on those sorts of skills which bring the right characteristics into business, rather than necessarily emphasizing focus on exactly what job we need or exactly what course we need to fulfill. And, you know, just finally to wrap up, one of the areas, again, we're looking at in the council is the modularization, the revision of accreditation, and how we have kind of next generation of skills delivered. And I think, as we know in our lives and our environment today, we're very used to modular updating. We're used to looking at things on YouTube. We're used to be able to looking at small subsets of things. I think what we need to do is to be able to bring that into the education system, which clearly is challenging given the nature of the curriculum. But some of the work that's been done on digital badging, micro-credentials, which is currently going on at the University of Stafford and is very attractive to DFE, I think could be a path for us to potentially bridge between where we are today and where we need to get to. So plenty more things to talk about. I'd like to talk about them in a panel, but for the moment, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. We'll just come and reconvene on the stage. And I have the online questions in my hand, so if there are any more, please do pass them along.
Yes, that one's yours, isn't it?
Right, any questions? I'll start with the room. Any questions or comments? Actually, questions. We want questions. Questions from the room, from those very stimulating. But I like the way in which they resonated with each other, contributions so far. Okay, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to the person in the red jacket there, and then there was another hand right at the back over there. Okay.
My name's Paul Hudson. As you probably guessed, in fact, I belong to the band of old gits and retired people. I thank all the speakers, in fact, for the enthusiasm with which they delivered their talks. But one of the things that worries me somewhat is the constraints on what you want to do. For example, regardless of your evident ambitions, the amount of money in real terms that's being funding, in fact, to school children is now something of the order of 10% less than what it was 20 years ago. Secondly, you have ministers of education who don't seem to be fitted for the role which they're in, and this is another serious constraint. But another thing that's also very worrying, and a friend of mine who recently retired from her chair of civil engineering at a British university was doing consultancy, in fact, for German and British architects. She stopped doing consultancy with British architects, she said, because they don't have the basic knowledge of civil engineering. In Germany, I know this is above school level, the students of civil engineering, students of architecture attend 70% of the lectures are attended by civil engineers. So they need to have a mathematics background. Now that raises another problem. I remember, I'm not a mathematician, but I belong to the Institute of Maths and its Applications, and also to the Mathematics Association. 1964, the Mathematics Association undertook...
Can I ask you to build this up to a question so we can make sure we get a few others in as well?
I'm trying to point out what the deficiencies are and the constraints that you face, and particularly in mathematics, people coming up to A-level, 60% of the students coming up to A-level are taught by non-mathematicians. 60 years later, that's still the position.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question over there. And thank you, because you remembered to introduce who you were, and so do please let us know who you are.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nikki King. I'm from the University of Exeter. It was a really fascinating set of presentations. Thank you. One of the things that I think is quite interesting in HE particularly, there's a big focus on awarding and attaining gaps at the moment. And I guess in schools and colleges, that's been for a while. That's in some respects, because it's easy to quantify that gap, or we think we're quite good at measuring attainment and knowledge. And that therefore raises the profile of that gap in everybody's remit. And I guess there's some fantastic examples of things to address skills gaps here, but they are pockets of really best practice. So are there ways we can somehow quantify that skills gap so that we can raise it to everybody's attention? Because I think at the moment, because it seems something which is a bit fluffier in terms of the way we monitor and measure, it's really hard to bring it to attention. We've got, there's some good practice around portfolios and things like that. So I just wonder whether the panel have got ideas on how we might start to think about skills gaps in the same way we think about attainment and awarding gaps, and therefore bring it to everybody's attention.
Great, thank you. And one more, I'm going to keep you moving around. Sorry, guys, Gavin, one more at the back there.
Hi, I'm Hannah Russell. I'm Chief Executive at the British Science Association, and really interesting set of talks, really thought-provoking. I have several questions, but I will try and keep to one. It was great to have Bill kicking us off talking about practical work, and I absolutely couldn't agree more about the importance of practical work in schools and skills, the importance of skills more broadly that all of the speakers talked about. And like the last question, we see pockets of brilliant practice, and many of our organisations represented here today are working really hard in this area and helping to support those pockets of brilliant practice. But we also know that it's not universally the case, and the trend is a decline in practical work in schools. And the Ofsted report published last week highlighted the worrying quality and quantity of practical work in schools. So my question for the panel is to get your thoughts on how can we drive forward systems change, not just our organisations individually supporting good practice, but to support an entitlement for all young people of all backgrounds to have opportunities for high quality practical work and project work through their education.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask the panel if they could pick and choose which of those questions they particularly like to respond to. But the question here really about actually how we can be having this conversation in the context of an underfunded school system that doesn't have the teacher profession that we need, and actually a bit of a similarity about, pockets of excellence and how we can bring them up to scale, and whether being able to quantify some of the skills and the technical skills, digital skills we're talking about would help us do that in the same way that we can do that with knowledge. So Bill, I will come to you first.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go for Nikki's question, and the last question, was it Hannah? I hope I got your name right. Yeah. Nikki, in terms of these slightly less well publicly defined entities like dispositions, habits, there is an institution, it's the Brookings Institution, which has been tracking those, and we can actually plot their occurrence or not in national curricula, and the degree to which they're defined, and the degree to which you can see progression from age 5 to 18. So I'd be very happy to talk to you more about that. And my heart warms to the last question, and it's the question, isn't it? It's what we're grappling with at the Common O Foundation. How do you get that balance between top down and bottom up? I think the answer is somewhere in the research method known as positive deviancy. We've just got to get much better at scale in identifying those people who are doing fantastic work, and then curating and understanding it. That's a little bit about what we've been trying to do with the Royal Academy of Engineering, so that we can better share it, because it won't necessarily translate immediately from one context to another context. And with respect to Paul's first question, it may well be we need a little bit of ministerial education as well.
Go ahead.
So I can pick up the question around the shortage of professions actually with teaching, and it doesn't actually just sit with maths and English. I know maths is one of our very difficult areas to recruit for as well. People just don't like to teach maths, but we have the same thing around digital, and it's what we've been doing in Activate. And I know this is just one example, but it might be a sharing of best practices. We have an ex-nurse. He's very knowledgeable, but he doesn't want to be a nurse anymore. So he came into education, and he's based in Oxford. The radius of the mileage of our college is around 100 miles. So if this person has to travel to Guildford and to like our colleges in Surrey and Banbury, they'll spend the whole time traveling between the different sites. So what we've been doing is he's broadcasting his lectures from Oxford to our students in Reading and Guildford. I did a recent survey with students, around 20 students. It was a small group, T-levels health actually they were, and they preferred that way to a teacher in the classroom who's not necessarily a nurse or an ex-nurse, because they saw the value in the knowledge that person is given. And you can apply the same things to digital. What we are trying to do is the contextualization of digital, because as a construction teacher, as an engineering teacher, you know what digital skills your students will need. You're ticking two boxes here. You are equipping the learner with the right skills for the industry, hopefully, or digital skills for the industry, but you're also cutting the issue with funding, because FE is underfunded as well. We've had this for years, and every year it gets less and less. So we have to be clever about how we face these issues. The money's not going to get more. We're going to get less and less. We have to keep doing restructures and getting less people. Industry pays better than education, so you get less people interested in teaching actually overall. So yeah, we've been trying to come up with some technological methods to deliver, but the contextualization that seems to be very, very popular with students as well as staff. Students like it when you speak their language.
Right, thank you. Ola.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for all your questions. I think Nikki and Hannah's ones are probably the ones that I'm only really able to shed insight into. I mean, in terms of how we can quantify exactly what that gap is, again, something McLaren have been doing recently is liaising with our local enterprises, our local organizations, and directly talking with them in terms of where we are struggling to fill jobs. And I've sort of picked up on it in my few minutes there, but software engineers, coding engineers, we were able to sort of echo that to the groups that we were involved with locally, to our Surrey County Council and to the alliance boards that we have down there. So that direct communication that we've had from the organization's mouth to those educational facilities has definitely really helped, and we've been able to sort of work on filling those job roles locally, and then hopefully as we sort of gain in growth, we're able to echo that across the nation as well. But I completely echo what Hannah was saying as well. You know, as much as we like to make change in a small organization, and believe it or not, McLaren is relatively small when we look to the bigger, huge OEMs that have got enormous programs and enormous funding into it. I don't necessarily have an answer to it, but again, we're really trying to be speaking our mind at the larger tables to make sure that our voices are being heard. We were fortunate enough to be representing a brand that quite a few people know about, and we get the buy-in from the students and the recognition, the visualization, but trying to get our voices heard with the little funding that we're able to do to channel into these educational systems is very, very difficult. But I think getting our seats at the table with these big boys and allowing us to have these conversations is definitely key. So we're working on it, and if I knew the answer, I would be there with you.
Yeah, and that practical learning challenge preceded the pandemic. I think it's really important that to recognize this was already something that was on the decline. And I think when I was talking right at the start about risks in the system, it feels to me we're carrying a lot of risk in the system from those students who've had such little practical experience.
Yeah, and I think on the you know, the thing we're talking about teaching students about is collaboration, but actually one of the things you see, particularly in the skills area, is huge fragmentation. And I think, you know, a bit of collaboration at the kind of system level with great guidance from people like, you know, the ideas that Bill and others would have. What we're trying to do with the council is say, you know what, there is, I know there's a shortage, there's definitely shortages in particular places, but there's a lot of money out there being spent on skills from companies, from organizations, from government and so on. But it's not generally all working together particularly well. You know, if you took the lens, for example, of a small business who's maybe trying to bring some of the people, it's a very, very confusing environment for them to look out into. And I think if we can simplify that and work together, I mean, I had lunch today with 2 or 3 different organizations who are all, and with, you know, said, we actually individually doing great stuff, but we're still not solving the problem. So we need to put our efforts together. And on the council, the Digital Skills Council, I've got Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Cisco, etc. All of them have fantastic skills programs, but none of them have got anything to do with each other. You know, they're all just, and they're all going for, and so, but they have all agreed that when they come into that council, they'll put the hat on the side and we'll work together to try and solve the bigger problem, which is how do we close the gap? And I think it's that sort of thinking that we need to encourage. And frankly, I think we're in that desperation stage now that if we don't get some of these skills in a competitive world that we're in now with our lagging productivity, as I mentioned, we're in a very difficult position. So with government support and industry support, I'm hoping we can start to see some of these collaborative environments, you know, created.
Great, thanks.
Well, I'll try and wind up by offering two solutions, if I may. And they might not be good ones, but they're two solutions. Currently, right at this moment, over this month, local skills improvement plans are being written by usually the chambers of commerce have been commissioned. There's 32 chambers of commerce that have been asked to write these. They are approaching businesses across their areas right now, and there are sessions running. If you Google LSIPs or local skills improvement plan, you will see a session in your area. Get involved, have your voice heard. The Skills for Jobs white paper was published in 2021, and that's become a bill now. And that commission these LSIPs, which are going out asking what the skills needs are in the areas from our employers, and are inviting you to feed in. So there is an opportunity to have your voice heard. And also perhaps to answer and to talk to what Ella spoke about how to get a different type of skill set into organisations, and speaking to you as employers and parents too, is perhaps we need to broaden our diversity and inclusion within organisations. We see at our colleges there's 50% of students with some kind of declared learning need, but we see those with Asperger's or autism really flourishing in computer science and digital technologies. They love it, and that's where their expertise lies. But I do wonder how well that type of person performs an interview where they haven't had perhaps the parentage or the background or the debating that might go on if you went to a private school or a different type of schooling, to practice your interview skills and your speaking, how to speak in front of an audience, how to answer interview questions well. And we do our best to give careers advice and guidance to those, all of our learners, but perhaps if employers were able to interview or welcome questions or people in and have a different type of way of choosing their candidates, that might help create more of a different type of pool of people for our organisations.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And I certainly know that there are lots of employers who are looking at different interview techniques and, you know, extended interviews, sharing questions in advance, all sorts of different things to enable that. And I'm going to go online now and actually share a comment and then some questions. So Christine McLean, just really echoing what you were saying, commenting that there is untapped talent, i.e. neurodivergent individuals who are often underemployed or not employed at all, who could support these areas but often fail in the education world to access further qualifications to support industry. But I've found 3 questions which I would like to share for the panel. One from Kevin Pollard. How can we encourage MDs and leaders in organisations to engage with digital? Perhaps they do not or cannot visualise how important digital competence is amongst their workforce. And then I'm just going to scroll up and find a question from Jane Gate, which I think this was kind of prompted in the earlier conversations. I was thinking it, so it's great that Jane was asking it and articulating it. How can we better reach parents with the message about future skills pathways? So many still consider the A-level route to be the only option for their children post-16, which you were touching upon, but actually how do we reach that parent audience? And then finally, from Angela Lawlaw, it would be interesting to hear what the take-up is from employers in respect of T-level placements. I think really, especially for you, Nancy, I suspect many don't understand how they work, whilst others just won't have the capacity to accommodate. And we've done a little bit of maths at Engineering UK, and by our estimates, when T-levels are fully rolled out in 2025 and those other qualifications have been defunded, we will need between 30 and 43,500 45-day work placements in engineering, manufacturing and digital. And so you've obviously had some success, but, you know, as Angela is asking, are we really going to be able to get to that scale? And so I'll start with you actually, Nancy.
Yeah, I was going to say we've probably dipping our toes in the water at the moment because it is only year 2 for our college running T levels. If we do imagine that every single subject area needs an industry placement for every single student, I mean, I've got a team of 14 people doing that across Activate Learning. It's no small feat. It's an expensive team to be doing all of that outreach and then all the monitoring of the placements that I spoke about as well. The T level funding is slightly higher than the BTEC funding, so the government have recognised that there are extra costs involved, but also the teaching hours are higher too, so we have to deliver more teaching hours within the T level. Yeah, it'll have to actually become part of the ecosystem for employers actually, that in order to allow this qualification to work, whether there'll be a mandate that makes employers take people on as interns or not, I don't know, but there'll be a tipping point, I should think, at some point where it becomes quite challenging.
Maybe somewhere we could use some of the apprenticeship levies to help.
Exactly, yeah, right.
Given that's not getting used fully at the moment. Yep.
It's getting close though.
Yep. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, the question about how you get an MD or CEO or whatever involved in this, it is a challenge, you know, because it's less of a challenge, I think, in bigger organizations, because bigger organizations typically have structure and people who are looking at people. They've got very specific people remits. And frankly, if they don't see digital as a challenge, and, you know, that is still a number of organizations, then, you know, they're probably going to lose out more generally. I mean, I have actually seen boards, you know, sessions talking to chairmen and CEOs where they've said, yeah, I wouldn't really have a digital person on my board because they'd get a bit distracted when we're talking about other things. It's like, really? You think digital people are somehow different from, you know, HR people or finance people or whatever? But that characteristic is really demonstrating the shortcoming of that chairman or CEO rather than the individuals. In other words, they can't see the digital as an opportunity for communication, for collaboration, for customers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, you know, that's definitely something that that one needs to be, you know, encouraging more. And I do think that more boards are asking more questions about digital, so CEOs are being encouraged to think about it. And frankly, really, if a CEO or an MD doesn't do that, then, you know, they're probably missing out more broadly. In smaller business, however, it is more of a challenge. There's no doubt about it, that timing, you know, the time poor individuals and seeing digital. And I don't think we've done a good job of defining, of showing them the business case for this. And so again, some of the work we're doing in the council is the business case and the narrative. You know, when we're talking about digital skills, particularly let alone technology skills, can we talk about it in a different way? And can we give them some great examples of business cases where people's productivity has increased as a result of doing this? And the watchword that we do in here and also in other areas I'm involved is people like me doing things like I do. So if you can get a business that looks a bit like them doing something similar, then you've got a chance. If it's a Silicon Valley company coming and telling them to do it, they're probably not going to buy it. So.
And I think there's a similar thing about finding the right language and words to persuade the businesses to engage with T levels. You know, actually, it's not an easy ask. How can we really motivate them? Ella, anything to pick up from there?
Yes.
Parents, but I thought you might want to go on.
You're right. So picking up on that particular parents' engagement question, I do think organizations are going to have to pick up the slack here. I think having sessions where parents can hear directly from employers and directly what they're looking for, I think is probably going to have more of an impact. And what we've done recently, small scale in McLaren, having things like parents bring in their children to have a day at work and see what they're suited and have them rotate around the company. That's been very impactful. But the biggest, most interesting session that I have run was an online workshop for parents. And I'm not a parent myself, but I did find it like absolutely fascinating how many parents were tuning in for the well-being of their children and getting their kids into educational systems. But making it online rather than having parents' evenings where parents are working, they're not able to dedicate a whole evening to it. We ran an online workshop specifically about how they thought, my opinion on public speaking can help their child excel in their careers. And because it was that specific skill and they were interested as to how that could impact and what kind of opportunities they can put their child up for to learn that skill, and the fact that it was online. We had thousands of parents tuning in, but from their cars, on their phones, you know, and they made it more accessible. It wasn't necessarily specific to a degree or a pathway that they might not necessarily understand, but it was an opportunity for us to target that particular skill and then roll it out into the different sectors. So we didn't necessarily home in on biotissue engineering or home in on material science, for instance. It was like, how could public speaking shape that? And then with that association of that skill, we got a lot more buy-in, and then through that we were able to educate on what kind of pathways that their children can take. So that was interesting to me, and I wanted to share that.
Yeah. I love the web version, but just quickly to say that when I was running Cisco, we had to bring your kids to work. We had to bring your parents to work as well.
Yeah,
it's really interesting because people, you know, particularly the younger people who brought their parents and they've got siblings, they just came in and they sort of said, "Oh, this is what you do," because, you know, I wouldn't go and work there, but then they came in for the day and thought, "It's just quite an interesting place."
Yeah,
Jobs,
exactly.
interesting people, you know.
love it.
Right. And anything to add, Sharmen or Bill?
So just on the point of parents, we recently launched an eSport qualification, and majority of parents think it's a group of youngsters get in a room playing games all day. That's what they do. And actually, it's a really popular industry. It has a huge amount of money in it, and it good jobs, you know, it's jobs of the future. So I think explaining to the parents that actually that traditional way of you've got to go down the A-levels route, or you have to have that type of qualification, needs to change, because there are jobs that we don't know about that will exist over the next 5 years. And I think it's just sort of introducing this to the parents. The other point around the senior leadership buy-in, and this is really a struggle if you are an FE, because there's very little amount of money and people want to put it for buddies in the room, which is teaching staff normally, and everything else comes after that. So I remember for 4 years, I used to talk to our CEO and say, we need digital in there. We need digital. Every time I see them, I used to do the elevator pitch. I got mastered in it, really. I could do it in 15 seconds. I could do it in 10 seconds, you know. We need to do this. And then COVID happened and everybody was like, oh, we need digital. So it ticked the box that we need digital. When we came back from COVID, or from lockdown, we had to then unroll the bit around how do we do this with quality? Because we just can't do it to tick the box. Everybody knows how to use Teams. Everybody knows how to share a document. Do they know how to do that safely? Do they know how to do that collaboratively with other areas and stuff like that? So I think it's about, to be honest with you, just saying the same thing over and over. We do have a link governor who's a digital link governor for the first time. We appointed them in 2021. It feels so nice when I go into the body of governors, because there's someone who understands what I'm talking about. And actually, it's not just jargon and someone who's talking technical. I think we need to speak their language. Senior leadership normally are not technically, with all due respect, they're not necessarily interested in technical, and they shouldn't be. That's not, you know, their interest. So I think you need just to keep saying the same thing over and over.
Right, thank you.
So somewhere between Sharmen and Phil, I think there's a language point here that perhaps we might want to explore. Phil talked about maybe, you know, cyber protection is too specific, and my spray of logos is really trying to make the point that tech skills are life skills these days. And if we start to distinguish between the two, we run the risk of just putting people off unnecessarily. I think there's another thing, and I think this builds on something that Phil said, that when we're talking about persuading parents that new qualifications are worthwhile, it's the most difficult thing to do, isn't it? Because we have inbuilt biology to want the best for our kids. So we're going to be suspicious of change. Look what the apprentice movement did when it stuck the word degree in front of it. Degree apprenticeships are flying. So I think there's something about the way we name it. I think it's a tragedy that some of the BTECs that are really good may not exist anymore. So just to assume that you can have an either or, you either do A-levels or TE levels, seems to be so typically English and binary. When we could be so much more subtle. And the final point is, you know, think small. Phil again was suggesting, and we're doing a lot of work at Rethink Assessment on digital badging and digital credentialing.
Really powerful.
Well, what a surprise! You know, the scouts and guides and Juventus have known about that for ages. Now we've got technology. We can invent this, and we can invent this very easily and cheaply and quickly with employers. We've got a pilot right across Doncaster at the moment, looking at how through health and social care, green tech and engineering, we can educate the whole area that these things are really valuable, small scale qualifications.
Yeah, I got a stat from Australia that was saying that some work we're doing in Australia was saying that people who have digital badges on their LinkedIn profile get 11 times more attention than anybody else.
By the by, parents say they would like to get rid of GCSEs. So does the parent Kenneth Baker, who invented them. But parents also say they're worried about what might be put in their place.
Yeah,
So there's kind of innate, natural protective conservatism.
Interesting.
Great, let's take some more questions from the floor. Now, I know that you have been waiting a while. Has your question been answered? Sorry, just behind you with the burgundy top. Are you still wanting to ask a question? Has it been addressed?
Yeah, of course.
And we'll take a few and try and keep them succinct so we can get as many in as possible.
Okay, so this is around, I guess, T level and some sense B tech as well. It's about really how do we get also the sort of neglected part of the population is students involved in education and gives them a chance at accelerating. I mean, because I think the technical level often appeals to those who are not performing academically very well. And I think we should recognize that students develop at different times in different ways. And some just are, academically challenged at age 14 and 16, but can pick up on more technical things and need to be able to go back into a more academic education maybe later on. So I think it's this braiding of education, which is really important. And I think, if I might be wrong, but I think one of the things I understood from T level is at the moment, they're aiming really quite high.
Yeah,
and they
the
might
T
not
levels.
pick up
Yes.
this bottom third of the academic pile.
Right,
So
thank you.
Maybe I should stop.
And if we can come to the front and then the middle and then the back. Keep you back in.
Hilary, very quickly and very selfishly, if I may, as a representative of an external charity who provides, John Leevers from the Royal Commission Exhibition, 1851.
Thank you for tonight.
Thank you. We're often invited to become involved in STEM intervention programs effectively, and alongside the Community Foundation and others. I just wondered from the panel's perspective, if you were only allowed to make one recommendation, where would you think such interventions should be targeted?
Oh, it's a good question.
That's
Okay,
very selfish,
thank you.
I'm afraid. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, if we can go to the back and then we'll go to the back left. And a nice succinct question with an introduction. So let's keep those.
Where am I going?
Just to this hand up here and then over to the back left.
Hi, I'm Robert West from the CBI. I find myself looking at that question and the first part of it, how can schools and colleges prepare young people for a technological life? And Bill showed us that technological life and we all laughed because of the struggles we have with it. But each child that is born is going to be more and more experienced of living this technological life. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about the young people other than the skills that they haven't got. So I'm from the CBI, so I'll throw business in it as well. And the question I'd ask is, how can young people prepare schools and colleges and businesses for a technological life?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And then right over to the back, there are a couple will quickly, and then I'm going to ask the panel to be really pick your favorite and give a quick fire answer, or I'll be in trouble with Gavin.
Thank you. Hi, John McMahon from the RSA, Royal Society of Arts, or Royal Society of Arts Manufacturers and Commerce, aptly enough for the kind of intersections we're talking about this evening. And on that score, if we're thinking about tackling the technical skills gap, I'm interested in the panel's thoughts on how we embed creativity within technical education. And alongside that, if I may, what place does the panel think that creativity has within preparing young people and all of us indeed for the technological future that we're hurtling towards?
Go on really quickly. You might have me back. Actually, over to the left, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Chung from the University of Oxford. With the advent of accessible new AI tools and the prevalence of automation in my life, a lot of my young peers feel a nihilism with regard to what need is there to develop technical skills when it seems that the obsolescence of so many jobs being promoted is near and dear. So might you have any examples or case studies of campaigns to tackle this?
And that may be something that others in the audience could come to afterwards as well. Who would like to start with an answer to one of those?
Well, I'll give the young people and preparing us for business. I think it's a brilliant observation, and it really is powerful. And you know, when I used to have a large group of young people who joined the business, we always gave them, I would have them organize things like what we call town halls or all hands, because they would typically do it in a completely different way than I would have thought of doing it. We had a shadow board, we did various things. And in fact, that group was entirely self-organizing, which was also an interesting characteristic of a young group who behaved differently. They were used to just doing collaboration with many people. So I think it's a great answer. And I think it's one of those things where when young people, whether they come into the education system or certainly when they come into business, is giving them some space to actually work out what it is they are naturally doing. I used to always joke about the fact that people said, oh, you would ban Facebook at work. And I said, really? So you've now got people who have been incredibly effective at collaborating. You now brought them into work and you've told them they can't collaborate in that way. They've got to do email, which they told me was for old people, by the way. And so, you know, so it's just really interesting. Just take that reflection and put it in. My daughter, when she started as accountant, one of the accounting firms, they gave her a laptop and said, you can't use the Wi-Fi on it because it's not secure. It's like, so you've got a mobile device, but you can't use it. So definitely different thinking. And I think really powerful to keep reminding yourself of that is really an interesting observation.
I was actually going to
Fine,
answer.
go ahead. I'm
answer
interested for someone to answer the question about where the money should be spent.
Yeah.
Go on.
Only because I was picking up the same question that Phil was, because what I have found going to schools and in terms of what students can teach organizations, sustainability. They honestly are engraved in the most sustainable way to do something, or the considerations, the environmental impacts. And working for a supercar company, you're very aware of the suggestions that they're making, but it's absolutely phenomenal. And it's something that's going to hit every type of industry, every type of company, whether it's on a consulting basis for supply chains, whether it's specifically where you're sourcing your materials. I think that's something that's going to be huge, and something that we should all sit up and listen to, especially from an organization point of view.
Go ahead, Sharmen.
I can be brave and pick up the one recommendation around this term, if you're not going to ask me to leave. So I did engineering and I was good in maths. I loved maths. I was passionate about it. So I didn't have a lot of issues academically. But when I became a maths teacher, that's when I saw the issues with the mindset. So I think there's a massive ambiguity around what maths is and why do we need it. My students used to tell me, you're teaching me X and Y. I can't see any of that in real life. I would like for that mindset to change. And I know it's not a question that we can answer over a year or many years. And when I talk to students, especially, and just being very honest, girls in 16 to 19, they don't want to do maths because they don't know how to do it. They had a really bad experience with it at school. They had it in their mind that they can't do it. There's also an element of parents saying, well, I was never good at maths. I've heard this mother saying to me, or parents saying to me, well, I was never good at maths, so my child will not be a genius at it. I think it's a mindset with anything really that you need to master. You've got to have the right mindset for it. But I think with maths specifically, the issue is not just with the academic aspect of it, because a lot of them know how to count and do the different ratios and fractions, but it's the mindset that I can do it. That would be my
thank you. And it kind of ties in a little bit to that first question about the unengaged students and how to get them engaging. Phil, go ahead.
I love Robert's question. I think it's brilliant. And I'm going to try and weave in all of the questions into it. So how can young people prepare schools in a better way? Well, they can be actively co-designing what is taught and learned in the school. I mean, there are places that are doing that right now. They can be active participants in problem-based learning just as much as they are in the maths lessons, wonderful as they are. By the way, they can help to reframe maths. There's a really nice researcher, Al Cuoco, who describes math as being about tinkering, inventing, guessing, conjecturing, and pattern sniffing. That's a bit different from differential calculus and quadratic equations, isn't it? Gets the heart beating a bit. And as John said, creativity. I'm off tomorrow to look at one of the funded creativity collaboratives down in Cornwall, where FREng College and its and associated schools are in a project trying to develop employability skills by looking at the interface between creativity and employability. I can't be more creative than that, I think, otherwise it'll take too much time.
Fantastic, thank you. And then lastly,
well, I was going to pick up on the creativity in the arts as well. I think we talked about STEM a lot tonight, and I know STEAM is also a word we should use, where you put the art in the STEM technologies. So I think if we went to McLaren, there'd be as much about design and the fabrics and the paint and everything else involved in designing those beautiful cars as there would the technology behind them. So of course we need creativity in the arts, but I wondered, like maths and like English, whether we should be embedding it in every subject area rather than having it as a standalone subject in its own right, that people have to choose whether they're going to do performing art or whether they're going to do maths, English, engineering, whatever. We've all talked tonight about, you know, performance. We've all made a speech tonight, as nerve-wracking or not as that may be, but certainly if you were a drama student, you might have found that scenario much easier than somebody else that has never had to do that performance in front of an audience. So long live the arts.
Arguably, design thinking is the strand that links both those two together.
And actually, you lead me into a very nice opportunity to thank all of the panelists for their speeches, whether or not they may be drama students. Really stimulating, really thought-provoking, and led into a great discussion. Thank you for everybody for engaging and with your questions, some of which we can still pick up over further conversations. So I am going to thank Professor Bill Lucas and Sharmen Ibrahim and Ella Podmore, Phil Smith and Nancy Buckley, and also the Camino Foundation and the Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851. You will be getting a survey. Please fill it in. I was sitting next to Gavin at dinner the last time we had one of these, and he was telling me how much he needs people to fill in those surveys so that they can understand how it's going and what they need, and also evidence their impact so that they can keep getting funders, like our lovely funders, to keep giving us the opportunities for these wonderful evenings. So please do fill the survey in. I'm now going to do a bit of a tit for tat, because Gavin very kindly on the last page of your little booklet for tonight has promoted an apprenticeship inquiry that we are running with Lord Willets and Lord Knight, and you have 5 days still to respond, or you may have already started and just need to finish it up. But if we can take another strand of the conversation from tonight and build a little bit upon that if you would like. Our next event is on the 21st of March, and that will be a webinar only, entitled Mission Zero, Getting to Net Zero Emissions by 2050. And speakers include Chris Skidmore. So it's going to be a great event. He recently completed the Net Zero Review for Government. So please just have a look on the website for more information. And for those of you joining us online, thank you so much for being here and for your comments and questions that I've been looking at. Goodbye. And I feel this is very awkward now, because everyone in the room, we can all go and have a drink and a lovely bit of dinner. So I think the drinks are just through there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone.